2 weeks for God to give me a word. He decided to give it to me yesterday morning. 10 minutes later, my power went out. So I understand now what he was doing. Minister Sharika came and she planted the word. My job is to water the word. What we need to remember is that God has already placed it inside of us. He has already said that He has given us what it takes for us to place our hands on the sick and they shall recover. So what I believe is that I can place my hands on the sick and what? They're going to immediately be recovered. Right? Immediately. You know why? Because I expect it. And I expect it to happen what? Suddenly. But this song right here just goes with what I'm telling you. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. That's why I trust Him. That's why I trust Him. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. That's why I trust Him.
Easter Sunday, April 6th, 2026. A woman stood before her congregation, dressed, anointed, ready. She preached. She worshiped. She poured everything she had into that room. Her sermon that morning? Emotions versus maturity. How you choose to respond when things get hard. About who you decide to be in the difficult moments. She gave that message to her people on the holiest morning of the Christian calendar. Then she drove 40 miles home to Charlotte. Just after 2 a.m, police responded to Cardington Court in northwest Charlotte.
We have a breaking update on Charlotte murder suspect. Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools says the man charged with killing his wife this week is an employee at Southwest Middle School. Police arrested 61-year-old Eddie McCollum Monday in connection with his wife's death. Officers say that McCollum called authorities after the incident, claiming the gun he used was on the stairs inside the home. The shooting happened on Cardington Court, just off of Sunset Road. Tammy McCollum died at the scene. Eddie made his first court appearance today and is still being held in jail without bond. CMS officials say he is suspended without pay, and the suspect worked as an assistant for the Exceptional Children Program.
When they arrived, they found Pastor Tammy McCollum with gunshot wounds. She was pronounced dead at the scene. She never saw Monday. The last sermon she ever preached was about handling hard moments with maturity. The man who killed her was the one she had loved for 30 years.
I was best friend. Best friend. Best friend.
Y'all know she put her hand on her chest with that means. Come on, let's see.
Before we talk about what happened on that night, before we get into the crime scene, the 911 call, the charges, any of it, I need you to know who she was first. Because Tammy McCollum deserves more than a headline. Tammy McCollum was 58 years old. Her birthday was coming up that same week. Friday, to be exact. 4 days after Easter Sunday, one of her coworkers had already made plans to do her makeup for the celebration. That birthday never happened the way anyone planned. Tammy was not a woman who did one thing and called it a life. She worked at AT&T. She worked in healthcare. She worked at Ulta Beauty at the Belgate Shopping Center in Charlotte, on and off for about 8 years. Van Appleton, a master stylist who worked alongside her at Ulta, said after her death, "She was one of the most kind, vibrant, and caring people I've ever had the chance to know. She deserved so much better than this." Her colleague Shaw Brittany Evans called her Ulta Beauty's best employee. Not a good employee, not a great employee, the best they had ever seen. And then there was the ministry. Tammy was a pastor and minister at the Well Worship Center in Statesville, North Carolina. Nearly 40 miles from Charlotte. That is not a short drive. That is a commitment. Every time she showed up, she made a choice to show up. Church member Audrey Ingram posted a video of Tammy worshiping and wrote that her personality was full of light. And outside of the pulpit and the styling chair, she was a grandmother, the kind who shows up, who calls to check in, who never misses a moment if she can help it. Her daughter Davelyn said it best.
But even as a grown woman, she's just a girl. She's just a girl. She just like to do her makeup. She worked at Ulta. She just liked to go hang out with her girls at work.
She was not a symbol or a martyr or a headline. She was a person, fully alive, fully present, fully real. Tammy McCollum would have turned 59 years old that Friday. She never got there the way she planned, but her people made sure that day still meant something. And we're going to talk about that. Now here is where this story gets complicated. If we are going to understand what happened on Cardington Court, we have to understand both people who were in that house. Eddie McCollum was 61 years old. He and Tammy had been together for more than 30 years. He worked as a teaching assistant at Southwest Middle School in Charlotte, specifically in the Exceptional Children's Program. Students with special needs. Kids who needed patience, calm, and consistency every single day. By all accounts, he showed up for those children. Every single day. Nothing about that profile raised a flag. And here's something that makes this case even harder to sit with. In February 2022, just 4 years before her death, Tammy McCollum posted on her own Facebook page on their 30th wedding anniversary. She wrote, "30 years, y'all. I am truly blessed and honored to have been married to this amazing man of God for 30 years, and I'm looking forward to the next 100 years together. I love this man with all that is within me." She called him an amazing man of God. She said she was looking forward to the next 100 years. She said she loved him with all that was within her. And 4 years later, he shot her inside their home on Easter Sunday night. That is the gap this case cannot explain. His daughter Davelyn described the marriage this way.
Their relationship wasn't tumultuous. Their relationship wasn't arguments all day, every day over the small things. We're talking about people who've been together for 30 years of their lives.
She was asked directly whether her mother had ever been abused. She did not flinch.
If she were in a situation that she felt like she couldn't get out of, she dig her way out of it. She wasn't abused. She wasn't mentally, verbally, that's not what was going on there.
No police reports, no restraining orders, no documented history of violence in the public record. This was a man nobody was watching. His own daughter said she still does not understand.
We don't know why. We don't know why.
Those 3 words are going to follow this case all the way to the courtroom. Easter Sunday, April 6th, 2026. There is a particular energy to Easter morning in a household where faith is central. For Tammy McCollum, that energy had one direction, her congregation. That morning, Tammy McCollum stood before her congregation and preached. Her sermon was titled, and I need you to really hear this, Emotions versus Maturity, how you choose to respond when things get hard, how you decide who you are going to be in the difficult moments. She poured herself out for her people on the holiest morning of the Christian calendar. And then she got in her car, and she drove nearly 40 miles back to Charlotte. She had given everything she had to her people, and now she was coming home. We do not know exactly what time Tammy arrived back at the house on Cardington Court. Court documents reference an argument. That is the word. An argument. What that argument was about has not been publicly disclosed. At some point during those early hours of Monday morning, something happened inside that house. An argument. And that argument ended with Tammy McCollum being shot inside her own home. Just after 2 in the morning, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department responded to Cardington Court. When officers arrived, they found Tammy McCollum suffering from gunshot wounds. She was pronounced dead at the scene. She came home from preaching on Easter Sunday, and she never saw Monday. Just after 2 in the morning on April 6, 2026, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police received a call. Not from a neighbor, not from someone driving past. The call came from inside the house. Eddie McCollum picked up the phone. He dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, he told them exactly what he had done. He said he had shot his wife during an argument, and then he told dispatchers exactly where the gun was. On the stairs. He did not run. He did not flee. He waited. When officers arrived, Eddie McCollum was there, present, cooperative. They found Tammy McCollum suffering from gunshot wounds. Not one, multiple. One shot can happen in a split second. Multiple shots is a series of decisions, each one a choice. And that distinction is exactly what first-degree murder hinges on. Tammy McCollum was pronounced dead at the scene. Eddie McCollum was transported to CMPD headquarters. He told detectives the same story he had told dispatchers. He confirmed it twice, and then he asked for a lawyer, and he has not spoken publicly since. What strikes me is not the confession itself. It is the consistency, the composure. He remembered where the gun was. He stayed at the scene. He told the same story twice without contradiction. And then, precisely at the moment that mattered most legally, he asked for a lawyer and went completely silent. By the time Charlotte was waking up on Easter Monday, Tammy McCollum had been pronounced dead. Eddie McCollum was in custody. CMPD confirmed they were not looking for additional suspects. This was not random. This was not a break-in. This was a domestic situation. And the only two people in the middle of it were a husband and a wife who had spent more than half their lives together. The investigation had one central question to answer. Not who did this, but what the law could prove about why. Less than 36 hours after Tammy McCollum was pronounced dead, Eddie McCollum was standing before a judge. And the charge on the table was first-degree murder. First-degree murder is not just a label. It is a legal argument. Under North Carolina law, the state has to prove two things beyond a reasonable doubt. Not just that Eddie McCollum pulled the trigger. He already admitted that. Intent and premeditation. Courts have found premeditation in seconds, in the time it takes to pick up a weapon and make the decision to use it. But it has to be proven. Bond was set at $1 million. A public defender was appointed. He did not walk out of that building. Meanwhile, Charlotte Mecklenburg schools responded. Principal Walter Clyburn sent a message to families. Eddie McCollum was suspended with pay pending the outcome of legal proceedings. Those children with special needs who depended on consistency and calm lost a familiar face that morning. No letter fully covers that gap. And then the Well Worship Center in Statesville, the church where Tammy had served, broke their silence. On Tuesday night, April 8th, they released their official statement on Facebook, and it said, "With heavy hearts, we share the passing of one of our beloved church family members. This loss comes under deeply tragic circumstances, and we ask that you keep the family and all who are affected in your prayers during this incredibly difficult time. As a community of faith, we are reminded to lean on one another for strength, compassion, and support. We encourage everyone to respect the privacy of the family as they grieve and to extend kindness in both word and action. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Matthew 5 verse 4-inch. Blessed are those who mourn. That is what they gave their congregation. A scripture, a promise, and a request for privacy as they began the long process of grief. That is a church doing what a church knows how to do, not performing for a news cycle, but holding their people together in the only language they have. The tributes poured in from the broader community, from Van Appleton, from Shabrittany Evans, from Audrey Ingram, from Rick Soup Campbell, and CMPD Major Fishbach pointed his message directly at domestic violence. If you know of someone else who is involved in a relationship that may include domestic violence, please reach out to the police department so that we can provide you with those essential resources. No trial date has been set. The motive has not been publicly established. The investigation remains active. What the state of North Carolina is now tasked with building is a case that proves what was in his mind before he pulled that trigger. Everything we have covered so far came from court documents, police reports, and news coverage. But there is a version of this story that does not live in any court document. And I want you to hear it directly. One day after learning that her father had admitted to killing her mother, Tammy McCollum agreed to speak on camera with WCNC Charlotte. This is a woman who woke up on Easter Sunday with a mother and a father, and went to bed that night with neither. That took a strength that most people will never be asked to find. Take a listen.
You know, when you get that call that your mother has been murdered by her husband, what's going through your mind?
Disbelief, of course, shock, of course. I feel like everyone involved, myself, my siblings, our spouses, our children, I feel like everyone is in such a state of confusion because my father loved my mother dearly. So we're utterly confused.
Confused. That was her word. Not angry, not certain, confused. And that one word is the most honest thing anyone has said publicly about this case since it broke. The reporter then asked about the marriage itself.
Their relationship wasn't tumultuous. Their relationship wasn't arguments all day, every day over the small things. We're talking about people who've been together for 30 years of their lives. They've raised 3 children who are now raising a slew of grandkids. And all of that we lost in the blink of an eye.
30 years. Not a relationship defined by constant conflict. And that matters, because parts of the internet had already decided there must have been a hidden history of abuse before this family had even had a chance to grieve. The reporter then asked point blank, "Was your mother ever abused?"
My mother wasn't a weak individual. She wasn't an individual that didn't have people that she couldn't talk to if she was going through something. If she were in a situation that she felt like she couldn't get out of, she dig her way out of it. She wasn't abused. She wasn't mentally, verbally, like that's not what was going on there. That's not what was going on there, which is again where everyone's confusion is coming from. We just don't know what happened.
She wasn't abused. No hesitation. No qualification. No walking it back. Tammy McCollum is the closest living witness we have to that marriage. Her testimony deserves to be treated with the weight it carries. And then the reporter asked the question that sits at the center of everything. What do you think made your father snap?
We don't know why. We don't know why. But
we don't know why. Those 4 words represent the gap at the center of everything. And then came the final question. If you could say one last thing to your mother, what would it be?
Job well done, my girl. You did a good job. 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 And I was ready. And I'm handling it, and you would be so proud. And you could sleep well.
That is not just a goodbye. That is a daughter reaching into scripture. Well done, my good and faithful servant, and handing it to her mother, out loud, on camera, one day after learning her father had taken that life. And it was not just Tammy who carried the weight of that week. Davion Forney, the couple's son, was also there. On what would have been his mother's birthday, he said,
A world of emotions, just mostly trying to hold together for family and friends. But it's just going to be tough, a long road, probably for the rest of my life.
A long road, probably for the rest of my life. That is a son speaking about what it means to lose his mother this way. Not just to lose her, but to lose her like this. On Easter Sunday, to his own father. That road does not have a finish line. When someone dies the way Tammy McCollum died, suddenly, violently, on a night that was supposed to be sacred, the people who loved her do not get a warning. They just get a phone call, or a text, or they wake up on Easter Monday and see a name on their screen that stops them cold. The tributes came fast, not from institutions, not from press releases, from people. Van Appleton, the master stylist who worked alongside Tammy at Ulta for years, posted almost immediately. She was one of the most kind, vibrant, and caring people I've ever had the chance to know. She deserved so much better than this. Shaw Brittany Evans wrote that she was going to miss her beautiful smile and her bright spirit. And then she said something that stopped me. I was supposed to do your makeup this weekend for your birthday. These two women had plans. Real plans. A birthday was 4 days away. And then Easter Sunday happened. And Rick Soup Campbell called what happened a satanic act. He urged prayer for ministers of the gospel worldwide, saying pastors are under constant spiritual attack. But perhaps the most striking voice in all of the community response came from someone who had known both of them. Joyce Phillips worked alongside both Tammy and Eddie McCollum in ministry for 8 years. She said the news left her struggling to make any sense of it.
I was numb. I was numb because I had just seen Eddie, and it's just, I don't know, because I know the couple that I know, he really loved his wife. They loved each other.
He really loved his wife. That is someone who knew both of them, not just Tammy, both of them, for 8 years in ministry. And even she, sitting with the shock of what he did, could only say that the man she knew loved his wife. That is the gap this case keeps returning to. The gap between the person people thought they knew and what happened inside that house. Now, I want to talk about something that does not get enough attention. The congregation. Because the people at the Well Worship Center were not just mourning a person they loved. They were mourning their pastor. And those are two different kinds of grief sitting on top of each other at the same time. And the last thing they have of her, the last memory from the last time she stood before them, is a sermon about choosing maturity in the difficult moments. They're going to be living with that for a long time. Every person who spoke about Tammy in the days after her death expressed some version of the same thing. Shock. Not just sadness. Pure shock. They did not see a woman in danger. They saw a woman fully alive. Right up until she wasn't. Before we get to the questions this case leaves behind, I need to tell you about Friday, April 10th, 2026. 4 days after Easter Sunday. 4 days after the last sermon she ever preached. 4 days after she drove 40 miles home and walked through a door she never walked back out of. That Friday was her birthday. She would have turned 59 years old. And the people who loved her, they were not going to let that day go unmarked. They were not going to let Eddie McCollum take that from her too. Hundreds of people gathered at Hornets Nest Park in Northwest Charlotte on Friday evening. They released red balloons into the sky. They embraced one another. They listened to her favorite songs, not to mark how she died, but to celebrate how she lived. And the people who were there, they had things to say. Davion Forney, the couple's son, was there, standing in the park where hundreds had gathered to honor his mother. And he said, "A long road, probably for the rest of my life." He is the son of both of them. He lost his mother to violence, and his father to a jail cell, both in the same night, both in the same house. and he showed up on her birthday to hold it together for the people around him. That is extraordinary. Joyce Phillips was also there. She had worked alongside both Tammy and Eddie in ministry for 8 years.
I was numb. I was numb because I had just seen Eddie, and it's just, I don't know, because I know the couple that I know, he really loved his wife. They loved each other.
I want to sit with Joyce Phillips' words for a moment, because she is not an outsider. She is not someone reading about this on social media. She is someone who stood in ministry alongside both of these people for 8 years, who watched them together, who knew them as a couple in a faith context, which means she saw them at their most sincere, most vulnerable, most themselves. And even she, with all of that, could only say that he loved her, that they loved each other. She was numb. That word keeps coming up in this case. Numb. Confused. We don't know why. And that tells you everything you need to know about the gap at the center of this story. Now, I want to talk about what was happening online on April 10th, because while hundreds of people were gathering in that park, releasing red balloons into the Charlotte sky, the internet was doing what the internet does. It was remembering her. People who had never met her were posting her photo and writing happy birthday. People from her church were writing about the last time they saw her preach, Easter Sunday, and what she meant to them. Her Ulta colleagues were posting. Her ministry family was posting. The internet, which had covered this case as a tragedy all week, shifted on Friday. Just for a moment, it became the birthday. Shaw Brittany Evans, the Ulta colleague who had planned to do Tammy's makeup for her birthday, had said earlier in the week, "I was supposed to do your makeup this weekend for your birthday." That birthday came without Tammy in it, but not without Tammy in it either. Because if there were hundreds of people releasing red balloons into the sky in her honor, she was in every single one of them. Eddie McCollum sat in the Mecklenburg County Jail while they released those balloons, charged with first-degree murder, bond set at $1 million. His next court date, April 28th. He did not get to be there, but they were. As the balloons rose into the sky above Hornets Nest Park, those gathered reflected on how many lives Tammy McCollum had touched, choosing to remember her not for how she died, but for how she lived. We have covered a lot of ground in this video, and I want to acknowledge something. There is no clean resolution here. There is no moment where everything snaps into focus and makes sense. What there is are questions, important ones, ones that deserve to be asked out loud. Question 1. What was in Eddie McCollum's mind before he pulled that trigger? First-degree murder requires the state to prove premeditation. And right now, the only person who knows the answer is sitting in the Mecklenburg County Jail with his right to remain silent firmly in place. The motive has not been publicly established. Court documents reference an argument. That is all. Question 2. How do we talk about domestic violence in cases that don't fit the familiar pattern? The familiar pattern has a paper trail. Prior police reports, restraining orders, neighbors who heard things through the walls. This case does not fit that pattern. And yet here we are. A woman is dead, shot inside her own home by the man she had been married to for 30 years. Sometimes the first incident is also the last one. The absence of a documented history does not mean the absence of danger. Question 3. What does a congregation do with a sermon they cannot unhear? The last message the people of the Well Worship Center have of Tammy McCollum is a sermon about keeping your maturity when life gets hard. She gave them that on Easter Sunday morning, and by the time they woke up on Easter Monday, she was gone. They're going to have to figure out what to do with it. How to carry a message about composure in the hard moments from a woman whose last hard moment was something none of them could have protected her from. Question 4. What do we do with the gap between who someone appears to be and what they are capable of? Eddie McCollum was not a man anyone was watching. He worked with exceptional children. He showed up for 30 years of marriage. His wife called him an amazing man of God on their anniversary just 4 years ago. His ministry colleague said he really loved his wife. And then on Easter Sunday night, something happened that nobody can explain. It does not give us a monster to point to. It gives us a man who, by every outward appearance, was ordinary. And ordinary is the most frightening thing a case like this can offer. Because ordinary means it can live anywhere, behind any front door, inside any marriage, on any quiet street in any city in this country. Question 5. What actually happened inside that house? The public record gives us bookends. The Easter Sunday sermon on one end, the 911 call on the other. Everything in between we do not know. That belongs to the courts now. And the courts move slowly. What I know, sitting with all of this, is that the public record is only showing us the edges of something much deeper. Tammy McCollum deserves more than a charge and a bond hearing. She deserves the full truth on record. We started this video on Easter Sunday morning. A woman in a church in Statesville, North Carolina, standing before her congregation, dressed, anointed, ready, preaching a sermon titled Emotions versus Maturity. She gave that message to her people, and then she drove 40 miles home, and she never walked back out of that house. I want to take this last moment, not to summarize the case, but just to say her name. Tammy McCollum, the woman who liked doing her makeup, who liked going out with her girls from work, the grandmother whose grandchildren are growing up without her, the pastor whose congregation has to figure out how to grieve without the person who would normally help them grieve, the woman whose son stood in a park on her birthday and said, "It's going to be a long road, probably for the rest of my life." The woman whose daughter said, "Job well done, my girl." On Friday, April 10th, 4 days after Easter Sunday, on what would have been her 59th birthday, hundreds of people stood in Hornets Nest Park and released red balloons into the sky for her. They chose to remember not how she died, but how she lived. That is who Tammy McCollum was. The kind of woman whose birthday still gets celebrated, even when she is gone. Even when the circumstances of her death are devastating. Even when the questions do not have answers yet. The people still showed up. The balloons still went up. Because she mattered that much. I also want to say something directly to anyone watching this who is in a relationship that does not feel safe. You do not need bruises to ask for help. You do not need a police report to take your own safety seriously. National Domestic Violence Hotline 1-800-799-7233. Text START to 88788, thehotline.org. Eddie McCollum remains in the Mecklenburg County Jail. Bond set at $1 million. Charged with first-degree murder. Next court date, April 28th. No trial date has been set. We're going to keep following this. Every court date. Every development. If this video moved you, please share it. Not for the numbers, but because Tammy McCollum's story deserves to be heard. And the conversations this case raises deserve to keep going. Subscribe if you are new here. Hit the notification bell. Drop a comment below. Tell me what question from this case is sitting with you the most. I read every single one. Tammy McCollum preached on Easter Sunday. She went home, and she never saw Monday. She was not a headline before she became one. She was a whole life. And she deserved every single day she did not get. Rest well, Tammy. Job well done.